Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Conversations on Conversations, where each week we explore a topic to help us have better conversations with ourselves and with other people. I'm your host, Sarah Noll Wilson, and as always, I'm so excited. I'm always excited, and I'm so excited to introduce you to Rachel Sheerin. So a little bit about my dear colleague, friend, and general amazing woman, Rachel. She is an award-winning keynote speaker and MC who's been described as the Brene Brown of Burnout, who energizes and engages audiences with her signature blend of humor and authenticity. Named the Speaker of the Year by NACE, Rachel shares her insights as a professional behavioral analyst to help attendees achieve success they love. I just want to say that again. I love that. To achieve success they love. With her viral TEDx talk entitled How to Burn Out and Be Successful, Rachel has served audiences from Spain to Seattle to 160 plus Zoom rooms and she takes her margaritas on rocks. This is something that, I adore about her. She has a book coming out in 2022, and her continued research and motivational content around burnout, happiness, and success can be heard on her weekly podcast and newsletter. Rachel Sheerin, welcome, my love.
Sarah, for anyone that is listening to this in the car, I am Price is Writing right now. Just high-fiving everyone down. It's an honor to be here, Sarah. Longtime listener, first-time guest. Finally.
I'm so excited. I was trying to remember how long it had been. I know we just came up on our anniversary recently, but I think it's been 5 years. Was it 2017?
Yeah, when we first made contact, when we saw each other on the internet in a Facebook group and thought, oh my God, are you for real? And then you looked at me and goes, yeah, we totally connected. And it wasn't even so much the words we said. It was a lot of times the visual cues or just the energy, maybe even the punctuation.
One of the things
we took a chance.
Yeah, we did. And one of the things I will say is that one of the things that drew me to you was that we were part of a group for speakers, and you always just came from such a place of abundance in a space when sometimes people can feel very protected and, and holding close their information. I just remember that first conversation we had and feeling like I had found somebody who could walk on this journey with me. And we've just been so fortunate to have each other's back and to grow. And I'm really excited, and excited might not even, I think it's going to be really important what we're going to talk about. We know that the last couple of years have been really hard. We don't need to go into that. We all know, we lived it. This idea of burnout is something that I feel like is a word that is talked about a lot, and sometimes it's hard to understand what it looks like. And so today we're just going to really explore, because you've been thinking about and focusing on burnout for a long time, actually quite a bit longer than just the last couple of years. But before we get into that, Rachel, what else would you like people to know about you?
Well, you covered the important stuff. Margaritas on the rocks, check. Friends with you, check. I guess to me, one of the things you should know about me is that I don't think the answer to healing burnout is to take a spa day or even to take a vacation, even though I think if you're into spas, you should do it and make a regular calendar invite for yourself. And if you aren't taking vacation days, you should do that too. But I think that I really come from a place where I love success. I love people that are in love with the work that they do and the people that they serve and the people that they get to work alongside. They don't have to, they get to. And I think that's probably a large part of my ethos. I'm a very naturally positive person. That's of course experienced the ups and downs of life, but the conversation, I'm so excited, I think, to see where this goes today, Sarah. And you, I feel like, are such a leader in curious conversations and open and vulnerable and a lot of humility and just a lot of honesty. I think one of the things folks should know is that this isn't going to be #self-care. I'm somebody who really wants to help people who believe in their impact and who enjoy their work, really get back to that loving feeling. It's not about if you're going to be successful. That's the thing. The thing with me, you are successful. Everyone listening and tuning into this podcast is successful, right? There's a lot of people that don't seek out knowledge or are just not feeling it right now, or just, listen, sometimes brushing the teeth is the win.
Right.
But
right.
you are successful. It's will you want the success that you get? That's what I'm really here and excited and is at my core to really serve.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna get the success. It's just, do you want it?
Yeah. Yeah. And also defining that. I mean, I think that's why I paused on your bio, because it's the success you love. And I think sometimes we hear the word success, and in our culture, it's very much like title driven or money driven, or, but it's that, what's the impact you want? How do you want to feel when you show up? How do you want to feel with the people you're working? What's the, what's that ripple effect? And how, work is a part of our world. It's a part of for many of us, it's a part of our lives. And so how can we hopefully create conditions where we can feel really good about it? Because how we feel about work and at work directly impacts how we feel about ourselves and at home. And it has this huge impact. So Rachel, let's start with even just, as you think about the work that you've been doing and your own journey, because, and I'm sure you'll get into this, or I hope you will, because this isn't just a topic that is intellectually interesting. It's a very personal topic for you. And so I wonder if we can start there is, what was your journey to and through burnout to have this be such an impassioned, like you're so passionate about helping people think about it differently. So talk to us about where did you start to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm passionate about burnout because, to be honest, it hit me like a freight train. And it robbed me of almost everything I love, including my identity. It's very American to identify ourselves with work. You go to Europe, you go to South America, they're more laissez-faire. They're more, when you go to a party and you meet new people, they're not talking about what they get paid to do. They're talking about what they enjoy, right? And I think that's why, the margarita comment in my bio always gets a chuckle. But here's the thing, you know a lot about me because I enjoy margaritas, right? I've got that beachy vibe. I've got, I'll meet you on a beach anywhere.
Yeah.
But I also believe in that seizing the joy and whether, you're sober or whether you'd like some tequila in your marg, I'll meet you anywhere because that's the energy I've got. But to talk about burnout is because I am a survivor. And I thought I could outrun all of the feelings. When I was an executive and sales leader, I thought that I could just outwork it. I thought I could outrun it. I think I could outdeny it. How about I could be so happy and successful that I would eventually not feel burned out. And burned out, when I was experiencing it, I'm not going to lie, it was the biggest, nastiest secret, I think, of the corporate world. And I think it still is. We talk about burnout a lot, but we're still not seeing the upper echelons of leadership really talk as much about it. And to me, it was shocked when I did burnout, when I threw away my career, my title, my 6-figure income, my award-winning, accolades, my team, which, by the way, I had swapped in for friends because, all my friends, I had totally bailed on them to be a great professional, quote unquote. I lost everything in the mix. And what's wild is the more, first of all, I started to work through my own personal, identity and addiction to work and things like that. What I started to realize was I'm not the outlier. I was just the only one willing to talk about it. And, I'm the first one to admit I was raised Catholic. I was raised in the Northeast. And, we didn't talk about the tough stuff in my family. Just culturally, I think for a lot of us, money is private. Sex is private. Emotions, I think, honestly, other than good ones, were private.
Joy or happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, at a minimum, even if it wasn't private, right, that you should keep it to yourself, we at least kept it in the family. It was hidden till it was an appropriate time to talk about it. And being good was valued over being honest. And I don't want to paint it like my childhood was bad. It's not at all. It was just a generational lesson that my parents had adhered to and their parents had adhered to. And, it's funny. I remember certain things from my childhood that now paint a larger picture of how I feel now and who I am. And my father used to say, hey, happy is so much better, don't you think? And he did it in ways when I would maybe be sad or disappointed or things like that. And it wasn't so much a question as it was just a reminder to adjust. And he's right. I do like being happy. I just wish I would have known sooner how to hold a lot more complexity, hold a lot more different emotions other than happy and sad and good and bad and smart and dumb and winner and loser and thin and fat. And how about burned out and passionate or driven and struggling? And to me, burnout it's simple and complicated, just like life is simple and complicated, right?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack in what you just said, and there's a couple of places I want to go back to. I mean, one, just that honoring the complexity, and I appreciated how you're like, yeah, you can be burnt out and passionate, and you can still want and not have I thought I could outrun it. I thought I could outwork it. I thought I could deny it. I thought I could just stay busy. And, in especially in Western and American culture, there's such a high value, like you said, to put on work, but also this idea of hustle. And I know for me that, I think about my own experience, and, I often will joke that some people burn the candle at both ends. But, for most of my adult life, it was, I had a blowtorch in one hand. I had it rotating on a spigot, rotating it with my foot. I don't know, with the other and a flame, whatever, a flamethrower. And part of that was recognizing that there was an addiction to being busy. When people would say things like, Sarah, I don't know how you do it. Oh, I don't either. And there was kind of like an ego stroke, and realizing that, boy, that is really unhealthy. And so I appreciate.
And unsustainable.
100%. There's a real cost, not just to you physically. I mean, there's a huge cost to you physically, but emotionally. And you said this when you were first talking about when you experienced burnout for that first time of losing your identity, not just from a work perspective, but I know when I think about my experience, I lost my mojo. I lost my sense of confidence. I was doubting myself. And so not only was I tired, not only was my relationship struggling, but I had no idea how bad it had gotten for me until I got out of it. And so I'm just curious, from your experience, what are some of the things you see, as you're talking to people, as you're working with people, that's that cost of busyness. And, right, because we don't have the culture. It's like you're weak if you say, I want to rest, and like rest doesn't need to be more productive. Rest can just be frickin' rest.
Yeah. How about the fact that rest isn't something that you earn?
Yeah, right.
And by the way, we teach what we need to learn. That's my current lesson in my season of life is rest isn't a reward, right? It's not something to be earned. To your point, Sarah, you talking about, losing that sense of self and having like the physical aspects of it. I think those are some of the things about burnout that maybe the identity portion is so vital right now. And I think that's again, when we started this conversation, I said, hey, listen, I just want to say out to the folks out there who love their work, who identify with the work. I'm not here to change it, to be honest. I think that there's magic in people who are obsessed with their work. There's incredible leaders who will change the world in the teams or organizations or businesses that they build because they are so into it. They get people on board with it. All great movements have to start with passion, and your movement may be in an organization. It may be as an entrepreneur. It may be as the leader in your family, right? And that's, a big secret about burnout. There's paid work and there's unpaid work. And the past couple years, I want to say out loud, I don't think that burnout has necessarily changed as much, but I think that rarely have we all gone through something that has required life to be so much work.
Yeah.
All at the same time. A grocery store is work. Traveling, I was thinking about this the other day when 9/11 happened And the TSA was brought in, right, to scan you and search you and all this kind of stuff before we boarded airplanes. I remember the pushback for years on that. People still complain about TSA. And I just want to say out loud that, yeah, travel used to be a little bit more fun. But you know what? Travel is definitely more fun when it's done safely, in my opinion. So the trade-off is fine for me. And yes, thank you, clear and pre-check. So when we're talking about, like what do I see, or maybe the way burnout starts to impact people, I think it does start, a lot of times it's the deeper questions. It's the identity questions. It affects you physically. Gone, by the way, are the days of like powering through the cold or the flu in the office.
Yeah,
stay home. I hope we're going to keep that. Yeah, I hope we're going to keep staying home and erring on the side of caution. You don't need a gold star for showed up and infected everybody else. Thank you so much. I think about that it shows up where you're working harder, but you're working less efficiently. You're sleeping more, but it's not as rejuvenating. I mean, it can go physical, it can go mental, it can be in your closest relationships or even strangers. You can be transactionless, emotionless, or vice versa, go completely emotional with it and unhinged, which, by the way, is my style. When I start to lose it, when I start to hear narratives of things in my head that are just completely unreal, I know that maybe, hey, I'm stepping to the embers of burnout. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is we just have to all acknowledge here that work will never love us the way that we love work. And I mourn that. I just want to say out loud, that sucks, because I love to work. I love success. I love community. I love teams. I love making an impact, and I love work, but we are so much more than work. Work is just the medium in which we act and in which we share through and learn and grow and win and create an impactful legacy. It's just one medium of it, but it can't be, and it shouldn't be, the only impact and one that we have. It's not the only identity in life.
Yeah. I mean, once again, there's so many different paths that we can take. And so I want to name that. A couple of things that were coming up for me as you were talking is understanding that burnout can happen whether it's paid work or unpaid work. So let's just shout out to largely women who are doing a huge amount of emotional labor and managing the homes, whether they're in a work environment or working out of the home. And that I think there's some truth to what you're saying from the standpoint of we have never collectively essentially experienced trauma, and we're still navigating it. I think that's one of the things that I'm starting to see for sure. Is this like, because some things are starting, more going back to normal, quote unquote normal, right? Maybe some of our old habits are coming back, but realizing we are not the same people. And we had a former client of ours that we were talking with, and she made this really powerful observation. She said, the thing that concerns me right now is that we make this assumption that because somebody is productive, they're okay. Right? That we know that, I think everyone's aware that we went through and are still going through a mentally and emotionally challenging time. Our brains were just we're not conditioned and we're not set up to experience that kind of extreme complexity, right? Grocery stores, seeing people, everything was hard. And that there was something about that sort of simplicity of her statement of, we assume that because people are productive, that they're okay. And one of the things we definitely know is that this is what I'm hearing. And so I'm curious to see what you're hearing from, the people you work with. Is pretty consistently what we're hearing from people is, it takes me way longer to recharge. I deplete way faster. When we talk about things related to potentially like PTSD or burnout, is irritability, fogginess, tiredness. And people are like, oh, I didn't think I was burnt out. Because how much have we normalized burnout and not even realizing that that's what we're experiencing?
Yep. Yeah. Unfortunately, Sarah, I think the answer is honestly, it's not even possible to calculate it right now. Because only the further we get from where we are right now. And by the way, the more courageous organizations, cultures, leaders, individuals, families are able to talk about it, we'll know more. We'll know more soon. But from where I'm sitting right now, I think it's helpful to know the way I define burnout. You can get a ton of different definitions, but burnout to me is when happiness leaves your work. And it starts at work. And when happiness leaves your work, there is a greater risk of happiness leaving your life. Because I think a lot of times people think that, in the way the World Health Organization defines burnout happens to just workers. Well, I don't think that's true. I think burnout can sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, I can't hack it, or I'm losing my oomph, or you're getting fatigued, or, things like that. Remember when we were scrappy and we were great with the scraps? And, especially too, veteran professionals, folks that have got, a decade or so of work under their belt, emerging managers and leaders and teams and things like that. One of the interesting shifts I think that I hear a lot from my clients is, I used to be. And a couple notes on that, I just want to say out loud. You used to be somebody different, and now we're all different. The only person really holding ourselves to the standard is ourselves. And burnout happens to what I call triple play high performers. And high performers are not necessarily defined. The only way I can describe it truly is it's triple play, which means that they're high performers in heart. Like, these people give a lot. So if you're feeling burned out, or someone that's burned out, it's because I think you care a little too much. And by the way, I like that. I want to keep people who like that. The second part is I think they're high performing in their professional lives, in their organization. They tend to be traditionally successful. And by the way, success can look like a ton of different metrics. It can be a loyal employee. It can be a high sales earning employee. It can be a beloved. How about the glue on your teams, right? The folks that just are legacy, and they're so high value right now. And I think they're high performing in their communities and with their connections and their relationships. And I know that's, one thing, Sarah, you and I really deeply connect on is the value of relationships and the value of community, whether it's our given communities or our chosen communities. And of course, the built community that we surround ourselves with and that we get to serve. And when you think about yourself as a high performer, when you've felt the winds of success, when you are great at work and are rewarded with even more work, right?
Yeah, right. Because that's what happens.
1,000%. And productivity is the measurement, right? You're like, well, everyone's unhappy. Everyone's struggling. That's just the norm. What we're looking for is productivity. I just want to say out loud that the opposite of high performing is not failure, or it's not a failure. It's I think, what's an apathetic professional. That's the most dangerous person in America right now. In our teams and organizations is apathetic. And I want to say out loud, apathetic, it means something similar to indifferent, but it's used in the context of action. When you're apathetic, you just don't care, or you don't act like you care. And that's very dangerous, because I think that burnout happens to people who do deeply care. If you're just clocking in and out, like, kudos, But I think that because you care so deeply with your heart, with your teams, organizations, because you're driven, I think that that's where we're seeing it, honestly, in very heart-forward industries like healthcare and education, nonprofits, associations. I also see it with folks who are at the front lines of change, and they're leading a charge forward in their organization or in culture, their families. And this might be answering your question, but I do think that it starts with leading from the front. If you are feeling burned out, if you're thinking, gosh, what is going on here? You got to phone a friend. Just go ahead and frickin' Who Wants to Be a Millionaire it and call a friend. Because I know that's what, if I could go back in time, that's the first thing I would have done. I would have identified somebody who would not judge me as a failure, and instead see me as somebody who cared deeply about what I did and wanted to keep doing it.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
It's like, I appreciate you defining it, because I think sometimes people could hear high performer and think sort of like a single lens view of what that would look like. And the other thing, I mean, I want to push a little on the apathy a bit, only because sometimes that can show up when people are burnt out, or it can especially show up when people are dealing with depression. Right. And so so noticing and I think that I appreciate that language of like when happiness has lost work, and maybe happiness looks different, and maybe for some people they go, well, I've never really been happy at work, but I think of it as like the sparkle in my eye, the light, right? Like even just the connection, right? That connection of there's some jobs we do that aren't super, I don't know, maybe like motivating, but I like who I do it with, and I like how we do it and all of that, but when we're starting to just lose that light and lose that connection. And, you earlier, you were talking about things you noticed in yourself of like, or people might not, notice like I'm sleeping, but I'm not actually getting the sleep I need. I'm maybe struggling with connections. I'm all of that. And I think that because it's so hard when you're in it. Again, because I think we have such a normalized hustle culture that it's easy to be like, what's wrong with me that I can't, or what's wrong with me that I don't want to, right? And so how do we start to tune in more to our needs? And, like you said for yourself, really working on rest isn't a reward, right? It's something we all deserve. It's not necessarily for productivity. And so how can we start listening to noticing those signals, those little like moments? I know for me, I can tell that I'm starting to hit a stress level that's not manageable. We call it, my therapist and I would call it like the ribbons are starting to pop out, right? Like of a box. Like, and my colleague Teresa, made the observation, which is great when you have people who are willing to say, hey, some of your cues that you might not be aware of. She said, when you start to hit a tipping point in your stress level, you start to feel like everything is disorganized. So when I hear you say like, oh, we got to get this organized, or this kind of feels all over the place, shit, it's usually because I think you are feeling that way. And so that, I'm thinking about that too, from the standpoint of just how do we start to listen to those cues?
Yeah.
So we can catch it sooner.
Yeah, I appreciate you, before we move on, I appreciate you pushing back on the apathy, because I do want to honor that, a lot of times with different mental, situations, I feel like, and in general, what I want to clarify is I think it's uncharacteristic apathy that we should definitely pay attention to there.
Yeah.
Because it is stepping outside of that norm, because we all have that self mirror and that reflection of the identity of who we are. So Sarah, as you're saying, like what's wrong with me? That's such a vulnerable and real narrative. That's so simple. And I would say that listening now, it's like, well, we're asking the wrong questions. Can we offer curiosity to ourselves? And by the way, model it to others, because I know you love curiosity. Some of the questions I might ask are simply, what's changed? Being open-minded about it. Is it relationships? Is it situations and circumstances? Is it, is pessimism or optimism? Is it values? A lot of us have had a major value shift. It can honestly be influences as well. And how about maybe it's you that's changed? Can we just love on the fact that the whole point of life is to change,
right? To
grow,
to evolve,
right? Yes. Like, why do we love change when we're in an interview and we say, how do you deal with change? And the perfect candidate's like, oh, I love change. This is fantastic, right? We've all either believed the lie or loved the lie, said the lie. Maybe we're still holding on to it. But from a biological standpoint, we don't love it, but we know that we've got to hold on to it.
Yeah.
And we've got to embrace it in some way, right? We got to make it manageable. But when it comes to us changing, somehow we've labeled ourselves into this ridiculous corner. One of my favorite things to whisper or to joke with folks on is to say, the key is in your pocket. Because if you're feeling trapped, if you're feeling locked in and caged in, right? And, after a while you start biting at people and it's not good. It can go a lot of different ways. Personally, I went the throwing of laptops route when I was burned out. That was a super good credibility builder, super fun. I just want to say out loud, nobody was making me feel the way that I was feeling. It really was. It was me that had changed. And I just hadn't taken, I think, temperature of a lot of that. So if something's changed, can we believe ourselves in it?
Yeah.
I see doubt being high right now.
And I think that, honoring it, giving space for it, being okay. And also part of it is, because I think the belief that I hold, and when we talk about change, is we don't dislike all change. There's lots of change we like, right? But it's that idea. I mean, we fear loss. And so, and boy, that goes back to what you're saying. Well, I used to do this, and there might be some loss. There might be some mourning that needs to happen from the standpoint of accepting that maybe who you are physically right now, who you are mentally right now, but also having I think it's such an act of courage for people to get clear and to have conviction in what's important to them. And you're right. I think we've been through such a big values clarification that maybe who people are becoming or who they've evolved into because of all of this. Because again, is it a Native American? Like, you can step in the river, but even if you step into it in the same place, it's not the same river. And we just aren't the same people. And so, and that's okay. And maybe there are things you're not okay with. And so then what's that exploration like? But, and I'm trying to remember where I was going with this point, but there's stress on the brain. The glitches are very real.
Well,
but yeah,
to your
jump
point,
in.
honoring about the loving change, Sarah and I think you and I really connect that we enjoy the creativity and the flow and the growth and all this kind of stuff. Yes, we love change. I just want to say out loud, I don't think we love change outside of our control necessarily.
Right. Exactly. Like, and when change is done to us and we don't, or even when, and even when it's good change, sometimes you're like, oh, company's growing. Oh, what does this mean? Oh, what does this mean for me? And am I prepared? So keep going. Yeah.
Well, it's very humbling. And I love that you're acknowledging this, but even take it from a worldview. There has been so much change that happened. And I would pontificate. I would bet here that, I don't know, 9 out of 10 people, 3 out of 4 people, they felt their illusion of control be ripped and reminded of how little we do have control over. And that, I think, when it comes to change, we've all had to go through a lot of it. And some of us, it's kind of like baking a chocolate chip cookie, like some of us are baking soda and some of us are baking powder. And if you put too much in, you're going to have like these flat, crispy cookies, which some people love. Other times, if you put too much of the other in, you're going to have like fluffy, gooey, barely baked cookies, right? And sometimes people just strike the perfect balance, and that is awesome. But I just want to say out loud that the change over the past couple of years, it all reacts in us very differently. Yeah. So it begs the big esoteric question here. When you're burning out, what's changed? And if not this, then what?
Yeah.
If not me as I think I am, then who? Because you're the one thinking about yourself more than anyone else. You're the one who's saying, oh, well, you can't do this. Oh, you have to do this. Oh, you said you were going to do. You can, anyone at any time can pick something a little bit different, but it's about, is it authentic to you? Because remember, it's not if you're successful, it's will you love the success you get? Yeah. And I think our happiness is success. I think that our safety is success. Our financial security, definitely success. And, to me, I think about, why do I feel like I have to continue on? What is it about suffering or how I'm feeling? Insert however you're feeling. What is it about fatigue? What is it about detachment? What is it about just powering through or sucking it up or whatever, insert vernacular here that we coach ourselves through whatever burnout feelings we might be having? why do we think we have to do this to earn it? Is it that success is more valuable when it hurts? Is it that our gold stars will somehow be minted into a platinum coin that will get us into everywhere we ever want to be? Is it that when things feel heavy, I know that in the end, I've earned the lightness and happiness?
Right. Right. I mean, even to that, like, think about, one of the things that we talk about a lot, well, Nick and I talk about this in our relationship, or we talk about it as a team or with clients, is all of these rules that have been put on us, right? All of these, you should, and this is what should happen. And some of those rules, sometimes it feels like you have to, and maybe you do have to play by them in order to, right? Like have some stability or financial. And there's also, like, I want to separate out, like, there are times, depending on your situation, where you may have to power through for survival. Right. You just may have to, work the 2 jobs and you would prefer not to. And right. Like there are survival situations where you just go on autopilot and, like, what do I need to do in order to survive? And I think that
it's a pit stop, though, not a permanence.
Hopefully.
That's the hope.
That's the hope. Right. And I think that idea of rethinking, right? Like, what assumptions do we make? I mean, and that's that, what assumptions do I make about, it sounds so gross to say this, but I'm going to say it, is like, what assumptions do we make, to your point about, like, how much suffering that it needs to take to get there, how much, pain or discomfort or busyness, right? I mean, it's that, like, that's the quintessential badge. And I've been guilty of this for far too many years, of, like, oh, I'm just so busy. I'm so busy. And feeling like on some level that was like, oh, I'm successful. And, and over the last year, well, I would say last year, I'm having to get reconnected with it, because I've gotten away from it, from just what this year has brought, is really re-examining my relationship with rest, and being and realizing that it wasn't enough for me to just I just need to sleep more, or I just need to do some self-care, or from a surface level. But I realized that for myself, that I have some fundamental unconscious beliefs that are holding me back, actually, from understanding it. And there are times when I struggle with, like, am I pushing the company forward enough? Are we achieving what people thought we would achieve? Right? Like, is it okay that I'm closing my laptop at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 3 o'clock or whatever the case is? And I intellectually, I know that that's all bullshit. I know it is, but our unconscious beliefs, they're not always logical. They're not always rational.
Yeah, It's amazing how much the American dream is forced into all of us.
Yeah.
That the idea that
you just work hard enough.
Quote unquote, all you have to do is, and I love that it starts, honestly, at least in most journeys, with go to school and get good grades. I'm somebody that dropped out of high school myself. I love hiring. If anyone out there is currently hiring, I love hiring people with GEDs. You know why? Because most people go from K to 12. But folks that have had something happen and they've still achieved that GED, they know what hard work's about. They know, they have a lot more life experience than I think we give folks credit for. And to me, one of the things you really brought out in me, Sarah, is just this idea of, and I really want to honor it, because I think a lot of us, especially if we are leaders out there, if you're business owners, team leaders, maybe you're an emerging leader, and it's a first time and you're like, okay, excited to kind of just make a splash and be different than your predecessors, maybe, right? We're all working, I think, a lot of times to be the change, or to keep legacy going. It's your call, a lot of options. I want to say out loud that burnout isn't a one-time occurrence.
Yeah.
It's something, the point of it is to not get so far down the road that you lose what you love, that you got to give it up, that you got to throw some laptops and have whatever kind of atomic meltdown you'd like to. Unless, by the way, I'm proof of it, you can survive it, right? Some folks I know honestly are not that lucky. They don't realize until they're having heart attacks on the treadmill or at their desk, and it's lights out for them. And I speak with the people that they've left behind. They knew, that the folks, it's amazing to watch leaders. We think we're so good at faking it, but leaders, that the day of being the perfect leader, the day of hiding it, it's just, I don't think it's in service to you. And I don't think it's in service to your team, the kind of authentic leadership the world needs right now. But burnout, it is something that's going to revisit you. It's going to darken your door a couple times. And what's great about it is I kind of liken it to people that come door to door and sell. The first time the Jehovah's Witnesses came to my door, I live here in North Carolina, so they visit quite a bit. I spoke with them at length. They were extremely nice people. It was a beautiful day. We talked and I listened, right? And I had questions and all this kind of stuff. Now they come around and I don't talk to them as much. And it's okay. It doesn't mean that I blow them off. It just means that said with love, I'm not going to subscribe. Right. And that's not a comment on a particular religion. It's just a personal choice. And I think it's a weird metaphor for it, but I think that's a lot of times what burnout, the goal isn't to care less. The goal isn't to, quit and move to Costa Rica, unless that's what you want to do. The goal here is to keep doing impactful work and loving what you do and loving who you do it with and loving who you do it for. And when the flames start getting fanned, you've got this great little fire extinguisher to be like, meh. Or you're like, oh, yay, flames for a candle. I've just made this candle, right? Or you gather everyone around a bonfire and have a moment to talk about it. And then you work on putting the fire out safely. So it is something that, even me, I like to think I'm on burnout, 13.2 right now.
Sure.
Because it's a challenge. I catch myself sometimes in the mirror being like, Rachel, I thought we put this to rest. I'm like, I know, but we're back again. Let's do this one more time.
Because, your situations change. And when you figure out coping mechanisms or you figure out strategies, and we were just talking today, my colleague Amy and I, we were talking about this from a business perspective, is like, we figure things out and then 3 to 6 months later, things change. And now we need to figure them out again. And instead of getting, maybe frustrated, it's like, I liken, when I hear you talk, I liken it to my experience with panic disorder. And I remember fairly early on when I started being more public talking about my experience, I had this director pull me aside very quietly. He was like, hey, can I talk to you? I think I might struggle with panic. And I'll never forget, he was like, how did you cure it? And I was like, it's always a part of me. I just have a different relationship with it now. And that's not to say, I don't say that in a way to say, just accept that burnout is inevitable. But like, there are just going to be times when either internally we're pushed or externally we're pushed to a limit. And so how can we listen to those cues? How can we make adjustments? How can we figure out and find ways to recover more quickly? I mean, when I think about that with my panic, I couldn't stop the panic attacks, but I could understand when they started to come. I could figure out how to ride the waves. I could work to recover from it. And, and similar when I think about my personal journey with burnout, because I think I probably, when I think of it really, like the moment I was telling you when I left my first real big long-term corporate company and moved on to another one, that was probably the most significant burnout that I was conscious of. I'm guessing if I were to ask Nick, he would be like, oh, you're on like 20 point. You know what I mean? Like he would have known. So let's talk about that actually, because I know that was something that, when we think about the show, it's conversations with ourselves and conversations with other people. And so what are some tips? What are some ways we can think about supporting somebody when we might, either they've told us they're experiencing burnout or we're perceiving, I think that flame is getting a little dim. What are some strategies that you found to be really impactful?
Yeah. Well, I want to pause for a moment before I answer, because I'm excited to give some tangible tips and say that, one of the things I think often about is the link between burnout and loving your work and grieving someone or something you loved, because it takes a lot of love to be so incredibly sad and so incredibly lost and lonely. And to anyone out there who is grieving the loss of someone they loved or something they loved, maybe someone they used to be, maybe you're still out there grieving, maybe you're grieving a title or a position or a team, I just want to honor that and say, I'm so glad you loved really, really deeply. Because I do believe that's one of those things. If I could choose between being burned out and just not loving what I do, if I could choose between not, being a daughter that does not have a dad who's alive anymore and having to go through grief just so I had him for a couple decades, I would always choose the highs and lows. And I think that's what makes the world and a life experience so deeply rich and worth it, And so when you think about burnout, because it's paid work, it's unpaid work, I think when it's someone close to you, acknowledging, first of all, just acknowledging privately to yourself that this is happening, and getting really, really clear on you want to help, but they might not receive the help, or they might not know it yet. Because again, if you were to ask my family, they've like Nick, right? King Sheerin is what we call my husband around here. He saw it from a mile away.
Sure. Probably months before you did, right? Like
1,000%.
Yeah.
But you know what? I always win. I always conquer. No one could tell me anything about slowing down or taking a break or shifting so you know what? People don't like to be told what to do. I can respect that. What I would say the best gift you can give them is honestly being curious, taking time, slowing it down. How about asking just better questions? How you doing? Gets the B word. Busy. I'm busy. I'm busy. It's so busy. It's so busy. Gold star, gold star, gold star. Instead, what about, if it's your partner or someone you're really close to, how about, what was the best part of your day? What surprised you this week? What's something that you heard someone struggling with that you provided a solution to? What's your favorite part about what you're doing now? What do you miss the most? What's hurt you? This, by the way, leaders, you want to ask, to me, the most impactful leadership question that you can ask your team right now is, hey, I know we've been through a lot together. Is there anything that's hurt along the way that we need to repair? Oh, the love of you even asking and acknowledging, because Sarah, I don't think anybody...
And then being open to listening to it and taking ownership, right? Like asking, it's easy. Doing something about it is hard, but it's in that act that you can start to heal it.
1,000%. And I'm a big believer in know better, do better. I'm a big believer in we all have to vocalize. We all have to vocalize what it is that we need and give our leaders the trust that they'll hit it out of the park for us, that they can soothe it. But I can't say, either A, I can't say anything, or B, I tell them, well, no, it's actually this. This is the problem. This is the problem. It's a leadership responsibility to, first of all, create the space in which to have the convo.
Yeah.
But then to ask, to dig deeper. I know we're both fans of the coaching habit, that and what else, right? Because it's rarely, I think about fights with my King Sheerin and my husband a lot. And it's never about the thing we're fighting about.
No, it's always it's always something else, right? Like there's always, it's that. And I think especially, knowing that a large part of our audience maybe identifies as female is that asking for what we need is really hard because we've been conditioned.
Even knowing.
Exactly. Like even, when we do our work on elephants, we talk about, right, like when there's an issue in a relationship, it's usually because there's a need that's not being met. I can't tell you how many women will say, I don't even know what I need because I've just been so conditioned to take care of other people and to, nurture and take care of their needs. And, and that's part of that conditioning. Some of that's the giving, the loving, right? All of those factors that wrap up into it. And again, I think it is such an act. It's such an act of courage And one thing I would add that I've experienced that is really helpful, because it can be hard for people to accept help. Because again, I don't want to be seen as a failure. I don't want to be seen as weak. I don't want to put a burden, right? This is something we talk about on our team a lot. Like, I don't want to be a burden. Yeah. And so this is a muscle the three of us in the core group are really working on, right? Of just, and one of the things that, my colleagues have done for me is, would it be helpful if, right? So if you see somebody struggling, like, we had lost a family member during the pandemic, it's horrible to lose a family member under normal circumstances. But then when you can't get together and do your normal rituals and being together, it's just hard. And they're like, well, what can we, what can we do to help? I was like, I don't even know. And then Teresa said, I feel like carbs are always good. So would it be helpful if I made some cinnamon bread? Yeah. If I made some cinnamon bread and we dropped it off, and I just was like, sure. And I think that's something else we can think of, especially. And I think that's a really important thing as leaders, is that if you are noticing your team members, because they're more than likely not going to tell you, because it could impact their performance review. It could impact their money. Even if you say it doesn't, it absolutely could, because like you said before, the person who gets the most work done is given more work, and right. And who is rewarded, right? Sometimes the person who's just in the office long enough, not necessarily the person who's working smarter, but that's a really powerful question as leaders we can ask, is because we have authority, we have power, we have things that we can do for people that they might not know, realize, or think they can ask for. So I think that, like, hey, I've noticed. I also love, like, how
it's the multiple choice question instead of asking the open-ended.
Yeah.
It's like, I know you and I both have nieces and nephews. It's like peanut butter and jelly or chicken fingers for lunch, you know?
It's not what you want.
Because kids have no clue, right? They're like, I was just watching Eloise, and like, who knows? I want a dinosaur. Too bad. No dinosaur. To your point, I think when it comes to organizations, you're spot on, asking questions, providing solutions, understanding. There was a great HBR Harvard Business Review article that came out today that said, employers think folks want, better work-life balance. But what employees really want is to be valued at work and to feel safe at work and things like that. It's not just compensation and flashy work-life balance stuff.
Because if you value somebody, you're going to make sure that they have time for their family. I mean, because if
it's both.
It's both. It's all of that, right? Because if you you cut my hours, but it's 30 hours in an incredibly toxic environment. Well, guess what? It doesn't matter that I'm only working 30 hours. I mean, at least it's a little less painful, but like, people want to be seen, heard, and valued.
Yeah.
And it seems so simple, but it's not.
Well, you know what? Yeah. For some reason, we've gotten away from it as the glorified corporate practice.
Yeah.
Glorified. It's not applauded, right?
No.
And to me,
I don't think we got away from it. I don't think we ever were by it. Like, I think you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So somebody was like, oh, did you hear that empathy is finally is on the list? And I was like, well, empathy was always important. We just never valued it. I mean,
I always I think there's always going to be examples that we should have followed instead of the ones that we did.
Sure. 100%.
And to me, I think that's where I've actually learned the most. It's from cultures who, 5 years ago when I started, they were wanting to talk about it, and in organizations that are already, preventing burnout. If someone's out there now listening, I'd say, number one, make sure that everything every communication you have, and every, I think, training and talk is really focused on the person and the professional. There's no one way to do something. Not everybody needs the same thing. If you are talking to a person and supporting them as a professional and a human being, listen, we've all got blurred work-life value lines anyway. All right. But helping and seeing somebody as an individual, and as a person, supporting them in the goals in and out of work, I think that means a lot. There was a favorite client of mine, and I'll never forget it. This particular client, at their holiday party every year, They throw it, it's huge, rent out a great space, great food, bar, all the stuff. And these folks are on the road a lot. They're an event company that tours around the country 50 weeks a year, pretty much. And these folks work hard. And in the holiday celebration, they have a slideshow of every person of every child of an employee that's graduated high school, every baby that's been born, every new marriage, and every degree. Now, mind you, it could be of a spouse, partner, whatever.
I love that.
And this company, this owner, gives $1,000 savings bond to every baby that's born. And you want to see loyalty? I mean, I cry every time I see it. You want to see loyalty? Love on someone's children. Because, this particular organization calls themselves family, and they mean it because they eat together, they sleep together, they drive together. This is a family because they're touring all the time. But to tell me that you're investing to reward folks for getting a high school diploma, doesn't matter when you got it, where you got it, how you got it, $1,000 check right there. For folks, by the way, for folks that get an additional degree and things like that, they don't necessarily compensate monetarily, but they give a gift, they award, they recognize.
Yeah.
What's beautiful is they recognize the organization it took to get there.
Yeah.
The parents are up on stage. The grandparents, all that, that's how you do it, folks.
Yeah.
To me, one future wish that I have about culture and organizations and companies in general is that instead of just saying, here's our benefits package, instead, what about if we create a buffet of benefits? Because compensation's important, right? Everyone needs to be able to be financially secure and things like that. But here's the thing. Is it more time off? Is it the flexibility to work from home? Is it an FSA that's fully funded? Is it saving for your kids? Is it doubling the retirement? Retirement plans, some folks will tell you it's $12,000 a year or $19,500 a year. I'm here to tell you right now, if your company really wants to do it, you can save $56,500 a year. All right. And that's a big benefit for someone like me who graduated in 2008, #recession babies, I didn't save for retirement until a couple years ago because I wasn't part of any large corporation that offered it. That's just not my path.
Yeah.
But to make up for it now, and I'll be damned, because I just want to say out loud, I get leaders and organizations who have got a chip on their shoulder or a very elephant-like memory. It's an elephant's curse a little bit to remember so much. Oh, well, people didn't want that. People didn't like this. We gave all these gifts. Nobody appreciated. Guess what? You didn't ask if they wanted the gift.
Yeah.
And you didn't help people realize that it's about so much more than money.
Yeah.
It's about so much more.
I mean, it's like, to me, the like financial stability, like that's just like your foot in the door. It's just your foot in the door, right? That's a non-negotiable, right? Take care of that.
It's a bare minimum.
It's a bare minimum. And, going back to the story that you were sharing about the company, and, and maybe people are listening going like, well, we just don't have the funds, or we don't, whatever, but the thing is, when it's always interesting when people are like, we want to support our team members' mental health. And like, so what kind of lunch and learn can we do? And I'm not saying that lunch and learns or trainings aren't important. Having conversations about it, exploring tools and tips, all of that isn't important. But I'm like, well, let's start evaluating like the psychological safety in your company. Because if you want to impact, right, somebody's mental health, are you creating an environment that is safe, is inclusive, where they belong, right? Not just that they're, are invited, but do they belong? And I mean, you are tapping into my heartstrings of, like I think about this from development, right? That was my world, leading the leadership development efforts. And our whole philosophy at my last company at RROG at the time, I don't know where they're at now, but at the time was develop the whole person. Develop the whole person, not just for the role, not just for the benefit to the company. And so we fundamentally changed. Before it was just leaders got training. Our customer care reps didn't get, right? And, who got coaching? The executives got coaching, but, right? Underwriters didn't, or whatever the case might be. And it was such a fundamental shift because, and even just, and again, I think that like, sometimes what can happen is we think we're doing it or we think we're doing enough, but then I hear people use words like insubordination or they're a subordinate. Like, well, no, they're a human. They're a human.
I I had a client I recently liberated from our catalog. I wish them well, but they would use Enemy.
Oh,
because it was
boy.
a veteran owned based company.
Sure.
I respect and admire a lot of them, but I didn't realize that had carried over into the vernacular and the thought. You're either with us or against us, right?
Yeah.
And Sarah, if I may, I'd love to share a tool, a very quick audit.
Yeah.
You can use it for yourself. You can use it for your organization. Speaking to your L&D folks out there, HR pros. Let me tell you right now, I'm a big values-based person. I care about values. I think that values is how we show up. We make a legacy impact a lot of the time, right?
And not just espoused values, because let's be real, a lot of companies have espoused values, and then they have hidden values. Like, do you actually value openness, or do you value tolerating really terrible behavior? Yeah.
Well, I live in the South. Well, and this is going to speak to you. I live in the South. So, when I talk about folk values and I ask people, what do you value? A lot of times people are like, friends, family, faith.
Sure.
It's like a Garden Ridge sign in your bathroom.
Sure.
And you're like, okay, sure. But let me tell you right now, inauthenticity is a big stickler point for me. I think I'm worried that the world oftentimes sacrifices themselves at the altars of work and burnout and success and lead a life that is so disingenuous they don't even see it. And so I kept thinking, through my research, through these conversations, and here I am, friends, family, faith. I hear it very often in my local community. And I've discovered the way that you check yourself, you check what you value. Look at where you spend your money and where you spend your time. And that will show you what you value. And here's the thing, where you spend your mind is a bonus.
Yeah.
You can't tell me friends, family, faith if you're not tithing, if you're not volunteering, if you're canceling on girls' night, if you're missing a dinner and tucking your kids into bed. I'm not judging you. I just want to say that out loud. I'm very open-minded. You can value whatever you want. I'm just letting you know that where you spend your money and your time, that shows everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody,
right?
What you value,
and that applies to individuals and organizations, right? Because if we say we value, I don't know, we say we value mental health, but we don't spend any time or any money on that. Then
the pizza party and the one lunch and learn doesn't.
Like it doesn't. Yeah. That's not. It's not.
How about no meetings Fridays? How about unlimited PTO with quarterly 4 or 5 day weekends? How about that? How about creating templates? I know you and I are big advocates of out of office messages. How about creating templates that encourage people to share their joy? Because joy shared is joy multiplied. I can't tell you how happy it makes me to see folks using my templates, and they're like, I'm currently on a site tour with clients, giving them 110%, like I'll give you soon. Yes. How about the out of office? That's like, I'm currently in the most magical place on earth. Listen, Disney folks, I know you're a big one, Sarah.
I don't know.
Disney folks,
we're not going to get into it, but I may be on a farewell tour with all the changes they're making, but that's a conversation another day.
Fair enough. But here's the thing. When you hear someone's on vacation, I just want to say out loud, if you get that out of office notice that's sharing that and you don't think good for them, then you might be a little burned out. You might be taking things a little too serious.
Yeah.
Right? Check yourself.
And also as an individual, if somebody has a negative reaction to that, boy, that's on them. That's on them. One of the things that as I've been evolving is, continuing to find set boundaries and because it's one of my sort of internal worries is disappointing people. And it's in my DNA, right? That I will sacrifice myself so that I don't disappoint people. And
the narrative of someone saying, wow, and Sarah had so much potential.
Sure.
We really believed in her. Yeah.
Yeah. Or even just like, I don't even know if I've ever like even extended it beyond just like, I don't want to disappoint people. And it was interesting because so for those of you who enjoy when we are talking about like our out of office, that's courtesy of Miss Rachel. But there was a time when the inquiries that were coming in of people wanting to pick my brain, to have coffee dates, to whatever, it just became overwhelming. And I don't say that in any like, oh, look at me and look at all the people who, that's not what I mean. But it was the reality. And, and I was actually talking with my dear friend, Vicky, and she said, well, what would it look like to Like, can you physically have these? And I was like, well, physically, I guess. Mentally and emotionally and physically, probably not. And so it was the scariest email to send, but I just said, I really appreciate it. Right now, I'm focusing on my time, being focused on my work and my family. And I'm being, thoughtful about what I say yes to. So at this time, I'm not taking on these. And a funny thing happened is that every single person I sent that message to wrote back and was like, damn, I need to do that. Or I'm really proud of you for doing that. And just, I'll share.
Inspired, loving, supportive, not disappointed.
Not disappointed.
Maybe a little.
Maybe. But you know what? Like the thing is, and for those of you who are maybe joining us for the first time and you're thinking, I struggle with boundaries, go back to the episode I did where I interviewed Farrah Harris and we talk all about boundaries because, people who get upset at you setting your own boundaries have no problem enforcing their own, right? The one of the things that has been such a provocative shift for me was I always forget the author's name, but it's the book called 4,000 Weeks. It's a time management for mortals. Yeah, great book. I mean, I read half of it because that's what I do, and then I get what I need out of it, and then I move on. But relate it to that burnout of, I know for me the tendency was to just keep taking on, keep saying yes, to not want to disappoint people, right? Or having a hard time. Yeah. So the book is Oliver Burkeman, the author is, and for me it was like, oh, I got good at saying no to other people, but I had a hard time saying no to myself. It was like I would fast pass my ideas. And one of the concepts he talks about is just humans, we have unlimited imagination and we live in a world of unlimited possibilities, but we have such limited time, which goes back to your point of like, where are you spending your time? And realizing that like you will drop balls, you will disappoint people, but can you hopefully be at a place coming from, and I also realize as I'm saying this out loud, there's an incredible amount of privilege in me having this choice because not everyone does, but just knowing like, so am I going to disappoint the person who wants to meet with me or am I going to disappoint my mom?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to vote the person that wants to meet with you.
Yeah. And that might be different for someone else. Someone else may be like, oh, mom could totally wait, like.
Totally. 1,000%. Hey, listen, if somebody's absence from your life gives you peace, you're cool with it. All right. We've all got to have our boundaries.
Right.
But, speaking with love too, I want to say that, where you're spending your time and your money, it's a great, I think, accountability tool for ourselves because sometimes we self-sabotage or we create situations that are just unnecessarily difficult or making things harder. It's tough. Again, the key is in your pocket, right? You've got it. But I just want to say out loud, I can't say that I value health and go through the McDonald's drive-thru. I can't do it. It's not about weight. It's not about fitness. It's just about being healthy. I cannot keep drinking $1 Dr. Peppers at the rate that I was. And I only realized that because here I am and I'm going through the dollar drive-through, 5-6 years ago. And I'm thinking, look at me. I'm only getting a Dr. Pepper. I'm not getting all the emotional food that I want to eat. But here's the thing. If I'm on a quest for health, is this counterintuitive to what I'm doing? Right. And no judgment. I could make a choice and I still hang out with the doctor once in a while, but it's a great kind of accountability tool because I think one of the things organizations can do, leaders can do, individuals can do is, we talk about vulnerability, right? We talk about empathy and courage and all this kind of stuff. I just want to say, one of my clients, I work with them monthly. They're one of the nation's largest mortgage companies. And when we started working together last year, I said, okay, let's get all the leadership on a call. If this is important. And, the HR directors and things like that, they were like, oh, no, this is just for the employees. The employees are burned out.
That's like development trap number 2 on my list. Like the leaders don't need it. The employees need it. The team members need it.
Yes, this is yours. And I said, okay, here's the agreement that I'll make is I'll do a couple sessions and then I want to survey your employees privately. And I want to hear what they say. And we gathered together a couple months in, and the C-suite has traditionally not wanted to discuss burnout, talk about weaknesses, all this kind of stuff. They throw around, regulations, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. But, humility is about admitting that you have limits.
Yeah.
And it's granting permission for others to have it, right? To say that this has been hard and this is what I do. It also, too, by the way, joy is about saying that you have the capacity for it, in my opinion. Like when you share your joy does get multiplied. And, they provided programming, but they weren't providing voices. And it's not enough right now for leaders to say, hey, we hear you, here's this. What the new normal, the wish that I have is that we say, hey, I see you, we see you, and we're right here with you. And we're going to move forward together. And forward isn't a path up. Forward it can be a roller coaster, right? For high growth, fast growth companies. I think it can be a path in a wooded lane where you're clearing the future paths you're going on. It can be a well-worn path that's just a little different this time around. But I want to say out loud that organizations, I do think, and I know you're passionate about this, Sarah, if we've not got it from the top down, just a simple question here. Do you want people to have it as hard as you've had it? And if so, why?
Yeah.
It's difficult things it forged us because we were forced.
Right.
But it didn't make you successful. It didn't make you great. It didn't make you worthy. It didn't change your value. It just made you a little heavier. It gave you armor that may or may not be appropriate for this trip.
Yeah.
And we've got to self-regulate on that as leaders.
I think that's a really beautiful place to wrap up our conversation, Miss Rachel, because I think it's clear that we could keep chatting.
Oh my gosh, I know. I've loved this.
There's so much. There's so many beautiful insights, and and also there's a lot to unpack, and and we're looking at burnout through some lenses, and we know that there's some lenses where things may be out of our control, and and how can we still, even in those moments, show up alignment with our values, and how do we want to show up? Rachel, I want to ask you the question that we ask everyone, which is, as we know, this is a show about conversations on conversations. What is a conversation you've had with yourself or others that have transformed you?
I knew you were going to ask this question. This is probably, I'm not going to lie, this is that part of magic, I think, in podcasting and having public, earnest conversations that I just think you do such a great job in bringing out of people. The one I'm tempted to share with you is one that I share in my TED Talk. It's about my dad and being surprised when the people that love you want you to be happy. They don't realize you're struggling so much. I think for a long time I kept on a solid face, but I'm going to go with something different. I thought about it in the shower this morning. New Orleans, we both love that city.
My favorite.
And right? Anyone listening, it's magic. If you've been there, you get it. And if you don't, you got to book a trip soon. And the thing about New Orleans is that every single Uber driver will either tell you their life story, try and adopt you, or want to come party with you. I think those are the only three options. The only three options I've experienced. And one time that I landed, it was BC, before COVID. It was good times, and I got in the car, and this woman's name was Angel. She had angels everywhere in the car, and she started talking the instant I got in that car, and she wouldn't stop. She made me look like very introverted, and she's calling me Rachel baby love, and basically I'm feeling adopted by her. And as we're driving downtown, we're having a great convo. She's telling me about her son who was a gospel singer, and unfortunately he was murdered a couple years ago. And, she's like, bring up YouTube, subscribe to his stuff. It's beautiful, and so we're listening to her son. We're talking about, some of the favorite way for her to make gumbo, and how I shouldn't, believe all these other people that say one way and her way, and all this kind of stuff. And, eventually we get to, I ask her, do you like driving Uber? And she's like, yeah, I love it. She's like, I've done so many things in my life. And she's like, what do you do? And of course, there's that awkward moment where I'm like, I'm a keynote speaker and I specialize in burnout, right? And she's like, that's interesting. And I asked her, I say, Angel, have you ever been burned out before? And I thought she might not have heard me. I thought maybe she was on the phone for a second, because it was a long pause for her. And she goes, And I think it's so telling of New Orleans and trauma and experience and tenacity. She looks at me and she goes, baby love, in New Orleans, we're either drowning or we're burning out, but that's the cost of living and loving.
Mm.
And in that moment, a couple things happened, I think. Number one, I think that my love of New Orleans comes from their resiliency.
Mm.
You know, my grandparents lived on the Mississippi coast and they lost everything in Hurricane Katrina.
Sure.
And my grandmother lives in Texas now. She didn't stay.
Yeah.
But not New Orleans. You meet a lot of folks. I think that intrinsic darkness and light,
Mm-hmm.
and that intimacy and that knowledge and that honoring of it and that embracing of it and celebrating despite the darkness is really, really powerful. I also think too, the cost of loving and living, I chew on a lot. What is that cost? Cost is grief. The cost is burnout. The cost is, God, days that you close your eyes and you feel so supremely grateful to be living in this exact moment. You can't believe you're so, whatever the word is, lucky, blessed. I get emotional thinking about it, you know? The way that you think about what is the cost of living and loving. And to be honest, I don't know that answer until I think it's the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to say, I think the bet that Angel made, the bet that so many people out there listening are making is that it's going to be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the cost is.
I love that. And one of our previous guests, Paul, he said something he's like, that's the price. It's like the hard stuff is the price to get to the good stuff. And I think that that's a powerful, it goes back to the point you made in the very beginning of how do I embrace the complexity? Right?
It's simple and it's complicated.
Right. And and embracing it all. Rachel Sheerin, you're such a gift to this world. You have been such a gift to me. I am so grateful to be in conversation with you today, to introduce our audience to you, but I'm grateful to be in conversation with you anytime that we need to. And I'm so deeply just thankful that we found each other all those years ago. For people,
the universe conspired.
They did.
It did a good job.
Yeah. So for people who are sitting here going, I want to learn more about the work that she does, or I want to hire her for an event, or I'm just curious to learn more. What is the best place for people to connect with you?
I am super active on LinkedIn, so come find me there, Rachel Sheerin. If you want those out of office templates, go ahead and visit rachelsheerin.com/OOO, stands for out of office. You can download them there. But honestly, the best thing that you can do to support me is add me on LinkedIn because I want to cheer you on. I want to answer your questions. And I want you to sign up for one of Sarah's upcoming workshops.
Oh, look at you.
No, I'm serious. I cannot tell you how many times I have referred someone, talking about where you want to invest in. You are making it so accessible right now to help and to embolden, I think, empower, I think, activate the power folks have in them. It's really going to be transformational. I'm going to be a virtual front row. So I hope folks will join me there.
You're amazing, Rachel Sheerin. Rachel, thank you so much for stopping by the show and being you and helping us all reconnect to ourselves. So thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Sarah.
Our guest this week has been Rachel Sheerin. And there's so many notes that I took. A couple of things that resonated really deeply with me was when she talked about how she thought she could outrun it, she could outwork it, she could deny it. And that definition she shared of burnout, of when we lose our happiness at work, that impacts our happiness elsewhere. And I just had never thought about it through that lens. And so there's a lot of things I'm going to still be chewing on and realizing that our self-care evolves. It changes as we evolve. And how can I continue to prevent burnout in myself, my colleagues, and those around me? We want to hear from you. You can reach out to us at podcast@sarahnollwilson.com. You can find me on social media where my DMs are always open. If you'd like to find out more about the work that we do and how we can help you and your teams have the conversations that matter, check us out at sarahnollwilson.com. You can also pick up a copy of my latest book, Don't Feed the Elephants, wherever books are sold. And if you'd like to support the show, please consider becoming a patron. Visit patreon.com/conversations on conversations, where not only your financial support will sustain this podcast and our amazing team that makes it possible, but you'll also get access to some pretty great benefits like swag and Patreon-only content. And if you haven't already, please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can do so on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. This helps us get the word out and to continue bringing on amazing guests each week, like Rachel Sheerin. A big thank you to our incredible team who makes this podcast possible, to our producer, Nick Wilson, sound editor, Drew Noll, transcriptionist, Olivia Reinert, and marketing consultant, Caitlin Summit Nelson. And just a big, wholehearted thank you to our guest, Rachel Sheerin. This has been Conversations on Conversations. Thank you for listening. And remember, when we can change the conversations we have with ourselves and others, we can change the world. Take care, everyone. Please make sure you rest and rehydrate, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.